Number 10, list the reasons American colonists rebelled against England. Include various acts passed by Parliament. Well, the basic reason, as we said in number 9, the basic reason was the colonies resented any attempts to make them pay taxes when they didn't have a say in what the taxes were, or how much the taxes were going to be. Remember, the colonies loved to govern themselves. And this was England taking away that basic right of governing themselves, and they didn't like it. There was the Proclamation of 1763, which told the colonies, you can't cross the Appalachian Mountains. We can't afford an army to send an army here to protect you from Native Americans in that part of the country, so just don't go there. They issued the Stamp Act, which was a tax on all paper. There were the Townshend Acts, which were taxes on tea, paint, paper, lead, glass, all kinds of things that the colonies wanted to use. There was the Tea Act, which placed a tax on the tea. Now the tea was cheaper than any tea they could have bought anywhere else, but it was the principle of the thing. The colonies didn't want to pay taxes without their consent or their permission. And these are some of the things that got the colonies all enraged with England and drove them to finally want to be independent from them. All right, the basic principles of government as stated in the Declaration of Independence. I hope you know these by now. First of all men are created equal. Second, all men are given the same basic rights, and these rights are unalienable. That is, nobody can take them away from us. They can violate our rights, but they can't take our rights from us. And Thomas Jefferson gave examples of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are some of the basic rights that all people have. The third big idea in the Declaration of Independence is that the purpose of government is to protect our rights. That's why government exists. Fourth, government gets its power from the people. It's that idea we've looked at called popular sovereignty, and it's expressed in the first 3 words of the Constitution, we the people. Popular sovereignty. Government gets its power from the people. Fifth, if the government fails to protect the rights of the people have a right to change the government or to abolish the government. And finally, if the people abolish the government, they have a right to create a new government. Okay, the advantages of both the Americans and the British at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. As you know, the British had a larger army. Their army was well supplied, well trained. They had a lot more experience. And if you just look at it from that perspective, the British should have won the Revolutionary War. But the Americans had some things going for them too. First of all, their people were committed. There was a lot of patriotism. Now, not all Americans were in favor of the Revolutionary War, you know that. But the patriots were. And those patriots who were in favor of it really strongly believed that America ought to be independent. They had a great leader, George Washington. He outmatched any leader that Britain could put on the field in the colonies. And finally, Americans also had help from overseas, especially from France and Spain. These things helped the Americans win the Revolutionary War. As we discussed this in class, some of you also mentioned that the American forces knew the territory. This was home ground for them, so they knew what the terrain was like. They knew what the countryside was like. And this really helped them also to win the Revolutionary War. All right, lucky number 13. Describe how the French helped American colonists win the Revolutionary War. Well, very simply. The French supplied Americans with supplies, with money, with ammunition, with weapons. They gave the American soldiers and ships. And remember at Yorktown, with the help of the French army, the Americans were able to surround the British there and led Cornwallis to surrender. All right, the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. Remember, the Articles of Confederation was our first plan of government before the United States Constitution. One of the big problems with the Articles of Confederation was that it gave most of the power of government to the states. The national government had very little real power to do anything. First of all, you remember, and most importantly, the national government under the Articles of Confederation could not collect taxes from the people. The national government depended on the states to voluntarily give them money. Well, no state is voluntarily going to give the national government money. And without money, the national government can't raise an army, a navy, build roads, create a postal system, make any kind of money that's valuable. All these problems existed under the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation also did not allow the national government to settle disputes between states. If states were arguing over borders or taxes or any other issue, the national government was powerless to settle that argument. Also, there were all kinds of problems with money. You remember, each state had its own money. Virginia had money, Maryland had money. It created a very confusing situation. Nobody knew what their money was worth in another state, so it really kept the states from engaging in trade with one another. And remember Shays' Rebellion. Shays' Rebellion revealed the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, and it scared a lot of people and inspired them to call for a new constitution. All right, federalism. Federalism is simply the sharing of power between the national government and state governments. There are some things that only the national government can do. There are some things that only state governments can do. Those are exclusive powers. And there are some things that both of them can do. Those are called concurrent powers. The federal government can declare war, not states. That's exclusive power of the national government. State governments can control education. That's an exclusive power of state governments. However, both governments can collect taxes and build roads. Those are concurrent powers. Checks and balances. Checks and balances is the system the founders put in place that allows one branch of government to limit the power of the other two branches. For example, Congress can pass a law, but the president can veto it or repeal it or cancel it. The founders didn't want one branch of government or one person or one group to have too much power, so they made it possible for one branch to limit the action of the other two branches of the idea of limited government. Remember what the colonies had just been through with King George III. He was a tyrant. He had abused his power. He had violated their rights. He had a lot of power as the supreme government official. The founders of our country said, we don't want to give government unlimited power like that. We want to limit their power. And the basic way they limit the power of the government is in the Constitution. The primary purpose of the Constitution is to limit the power of the government. The government can only do what the Constitution says the government can do. We the people give government permission to do certain things and to tell the government there are some things that you can't do. That's limited government. Representative democracy. That is a kind of government where people elect others to govern in their behalf. We elect others to represent us in government. They make laws for us, they enforce the laws, they interpret the laws. That way we're free to live our lives and allow others to take care of that part of our lives for us. Separation of powers. The three basic powers of government are to make laws, to enforce laws, and to interpret and apply the laws. If any one person or group has all three of those powers, that gives them too much power. So the founders of our nation, the framers of the Constitution, separated those powers of government so that the executive branch carries out the law, the legislative branch makes the laws, and the judicial branch interprets or applies the laws. That way, no one person or no one group has too much power. Now, judicial review. Judicial review is one of the powers given to the courts to examine the actions of the other two branches of government, the executive and the legislative. If the courts find that either of those branches has done something against the Constitution, they declare that action to be unconstitutional. So if Congress makes a law that's against the Constitution, the courts say that law is unconstitutional and they can't have that law. That law is repealed. Or if the president signs a treaty or does something else that the courts say is unconstitutional, that action is undone. It's sort of like a check and a balance, like we've talked about before. Well, we've talked about how flexible the Constitution is and that the Constitution can be changed. And the process of changing the Constitution is called amending the Constitution. And there are two different ways that the Constitution can be amended. The first way, 2/3 of both the House of Representatives and the Senate, that's all of Congress, 535 members today, they can propose a change to the Constitution. Then the change must be ratified or approved by 3/4 of specially called conventions in each state. A second way that the Constitution can be changed is that a national convention called by Congress at request of 2/3 of the state legislatures examine a new proposal, and then the amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures. These are two of the ways that the Constitution can be amended or changed.